Well, good evening, everyone. How you doing? You want to come up here and help give me some remarks here? Yeah. He's a public defender, right there. Well, I'm truly honored to be here tonight. Man, what a week, huh? Wasn't it something? The night after election night, of course, I watched the results and woke up and, felt like I just woke up on another planet. Or maybe I wanted to go to another planet. But you know what? The reality is that as much as things change, and we are about change, we make that change happen without the federal government. And the idea that we can count on our elected leaders, whether Democrat, Republican, whoever, to make social change in this country, particularly around the issue of criminal justice reform, is really a myth. And it's always come from the grassroots. And it's always come from people just like you. I met David and his family some time ago because they would come up to our Justice Summit that we have in San Francisco every year. And he told me about the Court Watch program, and I thought it was so brilliant. The idea of shining a light on what goes on in dark and musty courtrooms. And he's taken this program and really created a model here. And so I, for one, am going to support his efforts to bring this to Sacramento and San Francisco because it's such an important program. When you read the blogs, when you read the stories, not only are they written well, but they report things that we don't hear about or read about in mainstream media. Now, media is starting to catch up. We're seeing a lot more criminal injustice programming. I'm not talking about law and order. I'm talking about programs that depict the realities of injustice in the system. We're seeing more of that. And it's because of Black Lives Matter. It's because of the social movement that is gripping this country. And that really has nothing to do with who is president or who the administration is. And I know, when we hear who's going to be Attorney General or who's going to be Homeland Security, it's like a cabinet from hell. It's like, could you think of more terrible people, to be given those responsibilities and that kind of power? And sure, it's disheartening when you see that. But again, when it comes down to really fighting against the injustice that we see in the courts and in the criminal justice system, I don't care who's in that position. Sure, we had some people under Obama's administration who were much more open to that kind of change. But for the most part, the government works and the courts work precisely as they were designed to work. People say, the criminal justice system is broken. I never say that. I always say the system is working exactly the way it was designed. How many people have seen the documentary 13 on Netflix? Those of you who haven't seen it, you have to see it. Because it talks about how the criminal justice system, and I call it the criminal injustice system, from the very beginning was created in order to incarcerate people for cheap labor, and primarily people of color. That immediately after the proclamation, that declared slavery illegal, almost within weeks, there was a movement to criminalize petty offenses like vagrancy laws, and they were used as means to incarcerate young African Americans who supposedly had been freed by slavery. And that the exception to the 13th Amendment, of course, is that if you were in prison, then you could be subject to being treated essentially as a slave. And that practice continues today. So when you talk about the Jim Crow laws, the laws excluding Latinos, Asian Americans, the annihilation of 100 million Native Americans, the continuation of slavery through mass incarceration, right? That narrative, has been part of not only this country's history, but our present reality today. And that's what we accept, I think, as the thing that we have to change. Those of us that see it on a day-to-day level. I was just in Mississippi 2 weeks ago. You think things are bad out here in Yolo County. Man, I thought I'd seen it all. I had a chance to meet with 200 public defenders there and talk about racial justice litigation, which is sort of a subject that I've been giving talks around the country about. It's kind of weird, like being an Asian dude from Sacramento talking about racial justice in Mississippi. But I was there more to learn than anything. But there, not only do you have no right to bail, but you have no right to even be informed of what evidence they have against you until they indict you. Well, okay, that sounds fair. They decide to charge you, then they'll give you the evidence. Here's the kicker, right? There's no time limit on when they have to indict you. So what happens there is you're arrested, even on a misdemeanor offense, and you're held in custody until your indictment, which can take anywhere from 6 months to a year to be indicted. During that time, you have no right to what we call as lawyers pretrial discovery, which is looking at the police report and the other evidence in the case until you are indicted. And so you have all these people who are languishing in jail who don't even know what they're charged with. One of the public defenders told me that she has a caseload of 600 unindicted individuals on her caseload. She was walking out of the jail cell a couple weeks ago, and she could hear this voice, sounded like a little kid, a voice, and there was a little paper coming out of a hole in the door. So she took the paper, and it was a young teenager. He was only 17 years old, because there in Mississippi, you'll be charged as an adult when you're 17. If you're charged with a gun offense, and you're 13 and a half and older, you're charged as an adult there. 13 and a half years old. And you're housed in supposedly a separate juvenile area in the adult prison. But she got this note, and it said, help me. So she looked up his case. It turned out that he had been in that jail for 8 months, unindicted, for a misdemeanor offense. Get this, $1,000 bail. $1,000 bail. And, that story is basically the norm of what people experience day to day there. And, you think about that. I mean, it sounds like something that's coming out of another country. Not the United States of America, where it's supposed to be equal justice for all. And, I just heard so many stories like this. And there you don't have a right to a speedy trial. You don't have a right to a speedy arraignment once you've been arrested. And so you just sit in jail until you either plead guilty or they indict you. And so in the case of the 17-year-old, the lawyer brought this to the judge and said, hey, you gotta let this kid out. And the judge finally said, okay. And the prosecutor indicted him the next day so they could keep him in jail, So the bail system, if you call it a system, is one that not only discriminates based on the size of your wallet or the amount of money that you have, But it doesn't care. It doesn't care what you're charged with. It doesn't care what your family and community roots are. It doesn't care about your job. It doesn't care about your living situation. It doesn't care about your pet. It doesn't care about your kids. It doesn't care about your family. Right? It's not based on any of that. Just based on how much money they have. That's why Bernie Madoff was out. Right? Because not only could he post bail, but he was also able to afford his own private security guards who were assigned to watch him when he was out on bail pending the outcome of his case for years. You could be charged with murder. It doesn't matter. If you got the money, you're out. Yet, if you're like that kid in Mississippi, or people anywhere that can't afford even $500 or $1,000 bail, you are behind bars until your case is adjudicated. What that also means is that you're more likely to plead guilty. Why? Because that's the only way to get out, and judges know that. And this is something that judges participate in each and every day, that they will keep a client in custody, knowing that at the next calling of the case, the person is going to be screaming to get out, guilty or innocent, whether or not the case can be proven or not. And we do have a procedure to ask for a bail hearing, even after bail has been initially set, because the way it works now, typically, is that at your first court appearance, when you're assigned an attorney, your attorney interviews the person in 5 minutes, runs up to the podium, tries to make a bail pitch. But these motions are not done with the kind of care that you would expect, particularly if you're talking about a person's freedom pending the outcome of their trial. If it's a misdemeanor case, at least in California, we have a right to a speedy trial. So in a misdemeanor case, if you're in custody, you have a right to a speedy trial in 30 days. And if you're out of custody in 45 days, in a felony case, it's about 3 months before you go to trial, which is still a long time. But we can ask for a speedy trial. In many places, you don't have that right. And because of that, what happens is that a person simply pleads guilty to get out. That's the greatest motivator for people pleading guilty. It's not whether the charges can be proven, but it's whether or not they can get out of jail as soon as possible. And you put yourself in that situation. Think about what you would do if suddenly everything you knew was taken away and you were incarcerated. And we're supposed to have a presumption of innocence. We're supposed to have a system that reserves judgment. But the reality is that you're going to be presumed guilty from day one. The judge will look at the report, the police report, whatever the police say, and will say, okay, as far as we're concerned, we're going to treat you as a flight risk, we're going to treat you as if you're guilty, and we're going to keep you locked up for society's benefit, for public safety. And it has nothing to do, really, with any of those things, because if you can post bail, you're out the door. Regardless, you can have 50 false visas from all over the country or passports, and they're going to let you out if you can post the money. Now, how is bail set? This is even more nonsensical. There's something that's called a bail schedule. Right now, keep in mind that bail is supposed to be set based on your ability to pay. But they have a general schedule that simply states the offense, like resisting arrest, and it has an amount next to it, like $20,000. Now, you would think that we'd have one bail schedule for California. We are, after all, one state. No, instead, we have a separate bail schedule for every county. Every county has its own bail schedule. And if you compare the bail schedules, which I've done, I've looked at all the bail schedules, at least for the major cities, you will see huge discrepancies. For example, sales of drugs. In some places, it's a $5,000 bail, or even $2,500. In San Francisco, it's $35,000. So you can find bails that are 7, 8, 9 times as high. How are these bails set? There's a committee of judges. This is what the law allows. The committee of judges decides the bail for everybody else, and it's not subject to any kind of review. I know because I've tried to get into those meetings. I've tried to have some input, even writing letters. And they say, no, the law doesn't allow for that. And so these numbers are just set arbitrarily. Last year, for example, for contempt of court, which is like not showing up to court or flipping off a judge or something like that, they doubled the amount of bail for that in 1 year. So it went up 100%. Now, how is that justified? Is that based on inflation? Is it based on, some public safety danger that suddenly arose in a year? No. Somebody decided arbitrarily just to increase the amount of bail. Now, you may be thinking, hey, you know what? I've never been in trouble. I'm never going to be in that situation. Why should we care? Because when we talk about what's happening, with the criminal and justice system in this country, it has consequences everywhere. Why is college so expensive? Right? I mean, by the time you two go to college, it may be 3 or 4 times more than it is right now. And we're talking about public universities. It's because the highest ticket item is incarceration in the state. We're spending more money on incarcerating individuals than we are higher education in this country. About 8 years ago, it surpassed that, and it's been much more ever since. The fact that we have so many people in jail is because we incarcerate people using a bail system. And the reason why the bail system has persisted, even though it makes absolutely no sense, is because it's a profit-driven industry. They have a very, very powerful lobby. I know I've met with their national lobbyist a couple of months ago, and he was telling me about their interest in making sure that the bail system stays the same. The United States is only one of 2 countries that allows a for-profit bail system. Can anyone think of the other? Philippines. Yeah, that's right. You guys know your stuff. I saw that on the John Oliver program, which is great on bail. If you ever get a chance to see it, it's amazing. But the argument is that, from the bail industry at least, is that that's how they assure people get to court. But for people who are poor, they never get the chance to show up to court because they're in jail. And although they're not the customers typically of the bail industry, I'm talking about people who are homeless or poor, who can't even afford $100. Many of our clients who are poor and are of color are. Why? Because they're the ones that use the bail services, right? Because if you have a house, you have collateral, or you have cash where you can put up $100,000 bail in a case, then you'll get that money back at the end. If you don't have that money, then you're going to have to make a deal with the bail bonds people, and they'll take 10% of your money, they'll post a bail for you, and then that money is gone. Now, what is even more nefarious is that they have payment plans. And so a person, let's say, can't afford a $100,000 bail, maybe they only have $1,000 or $500, or maybe have the money at all. They sign a contract with the bail agency to pay it over a period of time, installment payments. And it's such a tragic thing that I see happen again and again. Why? Because a person often is arrested. A lot of cases end up getting dismissed. So they come up to the first court appearance after having signed a contract, agreeing to pay $10,000 or $50,000 over the course of monthly payments for 3 years or 4 years, and then the case is dismissed. The prosecutor decided not to file it, but the person wanted to get out of jail, right? Or you see people who have have their cases either dismissed or thrown out later down the proceedings after they've served 5 months or 6 months or even a year in jail. And again, it's because we have this system of detaining people based on money. Now, is there a better way? Yes, there is. There are systems that don't rely on money, that rely on common sense criteria like, oh, does this person have a history of not showing up to court? Oh, does this person have strong ties in the community? And that's what we're advocating towards, moving towards that. And one of my heroes is here. Phil is going to talk about the work that he's done for our office. And one thing I want to emphasize is, I don't know how many of you are lawyers, and you may think, well, geez, you know, I'm not a lawyer. How can I work on these types of issues? There's a lot you can add, because lawyers, for as much education and experience that we have, we miss things. And one of the big things I think we missed is filing these suits 10, 20 years ago. And Phil's started a nonprofit dedicated to overturning the bail system. And he filed suits, is it like 13 or 14? 11. Different cities across the nation, and has been successful. And he's going to tell you about what happened in San Francisco and what's happening also in Sacramento. But beyond suing, you know, based on the Eighth Amendment, there is legislative reform that's happening. There's a assemblyman named Rob Bonta, who is working with the ACLU and other organizations to introduce a bill that would essentially replace the money bail system. He's going to face tremendous resistance because of the bail industry and the amount of money that they have. But to have, you know, that kind of momentum going into the legislative season, where he's already working, you know, with ACLU and a lot of other organizations like Phil's group that have been, you know, on this issue for some time, both nationally as well as locally. And then beyond that, on the ground level, what we've done in San Francisco is that we started a bail unit. We now have 4 attorneys who are dedicated to doing bail hearings in every case. Now, under the law, Penal Code Section 1275, we have the right to have a full-blown bail hearing, meaning that we can call witnesses, we can produce evidence in favor of a bail release. And many attorneys don't take advantage of this. Why? Because they're focused on fighting the case, or they're focused on other aspects, when the most important decision to the client is whether or not the client's going to be out. And that's going to drive the outcome in cases as well. And so what we've been doing is filing bail motions in every case and having hearings in every case, and it's driving the judges nuts. Because now, you know, in addition to all the other matters they have on their calendars, they have 4 or 5 bail hearings. We filed some motions that were 100 pages long, and we're litigating these issues, and we're preparing even writs to the Court of Appeal. In every case now, we're raising racial justice issues in litigation. We're talking about disproportionate confinement of people of color, which is in San Francisco. Like 56% of our clients are black. Our African American population is now less than 5%. And we just had a Department of Justice report showing, and what we've known for years is that the police department is racist, whether you call it implied bias or explicit bias. Whether you look at the racist Texas or the indictments that resulted from our office's call for an investigation of officers who are violating civil rights. This kind of thing is happening everywhere. Right? Our numbers are actually worse than Ferguson, if you look at the percentages of people of color and how they're treated. And so, you know, armed with this kind of information, you know, we're now actively litigating these issues and these issues of bail, questioning the bail system. And it's something that is going to be infectious. It is going to flow not only across the state, but across this country. And so David is really onto something in the Court Watch team. And the future attorneys and citizens who are part of this movement. We started a mini court watch program in San Francisco until Dave was able to bring his program out there, and there's a tremendous interest in it. We had 150 people come to our last court watch, and ours is on a much smaller scale. We only have it once every other month, and people come in for the day and go to an orientation and then go to court and watch the court, and they make movies or blog about it or write about it or talk about it. And there's tremendous interest in bail reform, in wanting to change the things, because people understand that it is a question of basic fairness, and we all have to look at it in terms of what would happen if I was in that situation. Right? We know that there are people who are jailed for fines and fees, for not being able to pay tickets, for not being able to pay fines for misdemeanor offenses. Right? There's a huge movement now to overturn that. And so it's actually a very, very exciting time to be a part of the criminal justice reform movement. And Court Watch has had the vision for many, many years. A lot of the things that they've been writing about are now coming into fruition. And believe me, I've been a public defender for 30 years, and I couldn't pay somebody to listen to some of the things that we talk about now. And I'm out, talking about these issues 4 or 5 times a week, and fighting, these issues in the court. And I've been going around the country, as I said, talking about racial justice litigation. But we have those same issues in San Francisco. I'm trying a case right now of a 22-year-old African-American young man who was falsely accused of robbery while he was on a BART train. And of course, he stepped out of the train, and the officers came at him with guns, and he took him down. And of course, he gets charged with 6 counts of battery on a police officer. It was one of the first body camera cases, so I decided to take it myself and try it, even though it's a misdemeanor case. And so I got sent to a judge to try the case. The first thing the judge says to me is, I don't want to hear anything about Black Lives Matters or Oscar Grant. And I had filed a motion to talk about racial justice issues during voir dire, right, during the time we get to question jurors. And so she did a couple other things, like gutted my defense, wouldn't allow, I had 2 witnesses on the BART train, a UCSF doctor and a retired chemist, who said my client did nothing wrong when he was on that train, and that the person who falsely complained that my client tried to rob him was lying. Well, she allowed the testimony of the complainant, saying that my client tried to rob him, and excluded the testimony of the 2 witnesses who didn't even know my client. And so when all of that happened, I challenged her for cause. And so now we're in the midst of a cause hearing. And it's crazy what's happened since that time. They appointed a judge to hear the challenge, and the judge denied the motion. Well, it turns out that they illegally appointed that judge, because they appointed a judge from their own court, which the law says you can't. So I wrote a letter to the Chief Justice, who was supposed to do the assigning, and so they ended up having to vacate that judge's decision. And so at that point, I incorporated that into the challenge, saying that the court and the judge conspired to have one of their own judges decide the challenge, and therefore should be excluded. I also brought in 7 other declarations of judges, of lawyers, who have had experiences with this particular judge, including one lawyer who had experience, and this tells you the importance of Court Watch. What that lawyer said happened was that after his client was acquitted in a trial presided over by the same judge, the judge brought the jury in, and kept the lawyers out, with what they're not supposed to do. It's an ex parte hearing with the jurors, and questioned them as to why they had acquitted the defendant. Well, the judge was ordered to respond to that, so she filed a counter declaration denying it, saying that the lawyer was lying. And so now I've subpoenaed the DA, who is also at the hearing. He's not happy about having to testify in that case. But I mean, these are the kinds of things that you're confronted with, and often it's hard because if you take on these kind of challenges, there are consequences. Laughed at, right? When Phil and his team started making these motions, I mean, people didn't take them seriously, right? I mean, it's like, hey, So that's what we're up against, and that's why we need the community support. That's why we need you solidly behind it. So, anyways, I wanted to thank you and tell you how excited I am to be here. If you ever get in trouble in San Francisco, I'm the guy to call. But I was telling some of the law students, if you're law students here, we have a great program at the Public Defender's Office if you're interested in interning. One of the things that I've been involved in the last week is trying to hire actually 40 more attorneys, including 10 in our office, who are going to provide universal representation in immigration cases and get ready for whatever the new administration has coming on the 20th. But I'm really looking forward to hearing Phil's talk today. And again, I wanted to thank him for the great work that he's doing.
Good evening. My name is Phil Telfian. I am the executive director of a nonprofit called Equal Justice Under Law.